Welcome to the SolidCAD Revit Pub Night. Thank you for joining us. My name is Marcus Tatishi and I'm the latest president at SolidCAD, a Cancel company. For those of you who don't know me, I've spent about 20 years in the CAD and the entertainment industry. For 5 years I worked at Alias, helping promote their learning tools and training. And it was my pleasure to work with Autodesk the past 15 years, working with partners and customers to help them get the most out of their technology investments for products like AutoCAD, Maya, Civil 3D, Inventor, and of course, Revit. At SolidCAD, our mission is to deliver technology innovations that improve our clients' productivity, sustainability, and profitability outcomes. We recognize the complexity of design challenges our customers are facing is rapidly impacting the way that they create and share work amongst their teams. Given the pace that technology is advancing and occurring, SolidCAD's ability to consult with our customers that design, construct, and improve our infrastructure in urban centers using Revit is more important than ever before. It's why we're proud to sponsor the Revit Pub Night, here to share ideas, inspirations, and innovations that are important to you and others in the industry. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we've wanted to optimize this event that would allow people to interact, unwind, and also, of course, listen to experts and what they have to say about the current industry trends. Therefore, instead of canceling our highly anticipated Revit Pub Night altogether, we've decided to bring our Revit Pub Night in the spirit of that to the comfort of your own homes while helping protect community health. We've put together a fun evening full of games, prizes, raffles, and entries, but first and foremost, our live sessions on construction management solutions and visualizations to the next level. On the left side of the interface, you can find the agenda, speakers, profiles, and various functions like attendee to attendee chat, virtual booths, staff and group discussion tabs, where you can communicate and engage with one another or with any of our representatives in regards to any of the products or services that you might have questions about. Don't forget to head over to the sponsored raffle section, where you can enter for a chance to win a free annual V-Ray license generously sponsored by our partner Chaos Group. All you have to do is have the form filled out and then click submit. Feedback from any of our attendees is that you like the opportunity to win prizes at these events. So make sure to participate in the window play to win challenges. You'll be given instructions on what you're required to do. For every completed challenge, you'll be given a special code you'll need to enter and submit under each challenge tab. Once you've finished, make sure to fill out the survey via polls and survey tabs for more extra points. Keep an eye on your email and your filters to make sure you get them from our marketing team, and they will be announcing the winners of the play to win and the raffle game on the following Friday, June 26th. Almost forgot, here is one of your first codes. Winning 33. Enjoy.
Everyone, my name is Michael Rotolo. I'm the National Director for AEC at SolidCAD, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Revit Pub Night. Actually, it's a virtual pub night. The reason for that, sorry, I apologize. The reason for that is because of COVID, we've had to move this session online. It's usually at a bar held here in Toronto. We actually had plans to have this happen all across Canada, including Quebec, but with the current situation, we decided to invite all of Canada, and we're happy that you're here to participate with us. So I'd like to take you through a little bit of an agenda for today's session and explain what the Revit Pub Night's all about and bring you up to speed on a few things. So we're going to have our first session today is about contract administration, and then the second session is going to be about visualization and taking that to the next level. And then finally, we're going to bring all the speakers together for a panel at the end for a question and answer period as well. So typically, this is the part where we're standing in a pub, we're holding a drink, and we're saying something along the lines of don't drink and drive. So I thought I'd change that to don't drink and text. You never know what consequences will be of that if you do happen to have an alcoholic beverage in your hand at this time of the day while you're watching this presentation. So one of the great things about the Pub Night, and especially our new Event Mobi platform, is it allows you to network and exchange ideas with some of your peers in the industry. It allows you to ask some questions, maybe some private chats between each other, And during the sessions, you'll also be able to ask questions as well.
Hey, Michael, were you going to have a PowerPoint for this introduction?
Is it not being shared? I
Yeah,
apologize.
I don't think it's not coming across for me.
Sure, I apologize for that.
There we go.
Thank you very much. So this is going to be shared on our social media. The hashtag is going to be virtual Revit Pub Night, and it'll be both on Instagram and Twitter. So we also want to let you know that if you are sharing your camera during the session, your image may be used as part of our social media campaign. So for those of you who are new to the Revit Pub Night, I want to explain it a little bit more to you. What is a Revit Pub Night? So as mentioned, we've been having these in the past. It's a social gathering of Revit users typically. A lot of BIM managers, BIM leads would show up to the session. It is organized by SolidCAD, and we do have a few sponsors that help us as well. The subjects tend to be mainly around Revit, or at least BIM methodologies, BIM technologies, and it's for all the disciplines: architecture, engineering, and construction. And some of the people that show up are beginners, advanced users, or maybe self-proclaimed evangelists. So let me bring you up to speed on what's happened and maybe a little bit what's happening. So first of all, I'd like to thank Marcus Tatishi, our new president of SolidCAD. He started earlier this year. If you didn't get a chance to view his introductory video, I suggest you go ahead and do that afterwards. He'll even give you a code to be part of the submission for the prize at the end. So for those of you who aren't familiar with SolidCAD, we do carry a number of different products, and we do offer a number of different services. In most cases, customers come to us for Autodesk products, but we do have a number of other partner products that complement the Autodesk portfolio. Some of the most popular are Bluebeam and our CTC tools for Revit, as well as a lot of customers are asking about our specifications and maybe some of our testing of end users, which is becoming a big thing these days as you're hiring people, maybe in a virtual world now. So something new. We've actually just created a partnership with a company called Project Frog, and they have a product that sits on top of Revit, which is called Kit Connect. Basically, if you're doing any type of modular type of design or prefabrication, you want to take a close look at this product. It allows you to take your families and create parts, which can then be thrown into assemblies. It can be rules-based, allowing you to ensure that the proper repeatable objects are used over and over again. It's also based off of the Autodesk Forge platform, allowing maybe your suppliers or your manufacturers to have a look at what the prefabricated or modular design is. For them, it's now all about DFMA, another acronym to learn. So that's Design for Manufacturing and Assemble. The other partnership, which is even more recent, and the press release is going to be going out on July the 2nd, is with Simple Cloud AECM. Basically, Simple Cloud is a virtualized environment, allowing you to install Windows, Revit, and all the other programs that you typically use during the day in the cloud. So you'd log in through a web browser, and you have full access to a computer. It sits on a IBM data center using VMware Horizon and NVIDIA video cards. It's a very powerful system, and it can work in an environment with ProjectWise, BIM 360, and other type of collaborative project softwares that you're using as part of this. I also want to make you aware of some of the services that we currently have going on. We typically have done a lot of face-to-face training, but now we've moved that online to a virtual platform. Here's an example of what we currently are running. So we actually tomorrow we have a Dynamo class for Revit MEP. And we also carry our typical classes such as Revit Architecture, Revit Structure, MEP, Bluebeam, and a few other different classes as well. I encourage you to look at our services section on our website to see them all. We also have a number of service bundles that we offer. These are a bit more of a pre-packaged offering, which are not just for Autodesk, but some of our other partner products. So for example, Bluebeam, if you are a user of Bluebeam, and I know a lot of you are out there, you may be only using a portion of the product and want to up your skills. So we have a number of different service bundles to take you to that next level. You could be an estimator, maybe a project manager, or a project lead that uses Bluebeam a lot as part of your workflow. along with some of the other products that we offer. So for more information on the service bundles, our new products like Kick Connect and Simple Cloud, by all means, reach out to any one of the salespeople at SolidCAD. They're online at the Event Mobi platform, or you can email sales@solidcad.ca. Some Autodesk news for you to know if you haven't heard so already. So Autodesk has announced that over the course of the next couple of years, actually until 2021, they're looking to move people from a multi-user license to standalone single user, or what's now known as named user account. There's different rules that apply, and this is all starting August the 7th. Basically, if you trade in your multi-user license on your first renewal, you have an option to get 2 single user licenses or named user licenses at the time. But this is, like I said, is all starting August the 7th. So once your renewals come up, all of our SolidCAD sales representatives will be speaking to you and giving you all your options at that time. I will tell you that of the customers we have spoken to already, most are very happy with the transition. They like the fact that they're going to be doubling their licenses for the same amount that they've already been paying for their annual renewal. And it allows them to get more analytical information about the usage of the product and more flexibility on accessing it as well. Autodesk also has a current promotion of a 25% discount for trade-ins. That's basically if you still have perpetual licenses on maintenance, or that's not on maintenance, you could use that as part of a trade-in to a subscription at this time. Another interesting piece of information is Autodesk is also offering 0% financing for new and renewals of your Autodesk products. Now, the renewals doesn't count for the licenses you've moved from a perpetual to subscription, which Autodesk calls move to subscription. But if you're currently subscribed to an AEC collection or other types of Autodesk licenses and you're paying the yearly fee, you can apply for the 0% financing, which is good for either a 1 or 3-year term subscription. And for those of you who took advantage of the Autodesk Extended Access Program, we want to let you know that that program is ending June 30th. If you're not familiar with it, because of COVID, Autodesk and many other manufacturers offered extended trials or free licenses for a certain amount of time to use as you moved your workforce from the office to a remote type of environment. So anyone who took advantage of this, and a lot of it was around the BIM 360 platform, again, this is a reminder that June 30th, that program will end. And if you're interested in continuing to subscribe to that product, please speak to one of us. And with that, I'd like to get into the presentations. So let me go through who we have here tonight. So the first person we have, and you probably see him on the screen if not already, is Andrew Cole. He's the industry account manager at SolidCAD. He focuses a lot on construction. His presentation will be on contract administration, about how to do inspection processes and managing workflows and tracking all that information that you take from on site and communicating with the office and other people who participate in that workflow. The second presentation is our visualization, taking visualizations to the next level. It's from a company called Norm Lee. They've presented with us before. And Norm Lee is very famous across Canada for their rendering and animations that they provide. Norm Lee, the principal, was to participate, but unfortunately he couldn't last minute, but Terry Sin is still going to be presenting for us today. And they're going to talk about the concepts behind great architectural visualizations. And then, as I mentioned previously, we're going to have a panel discussion at the end, so allowing you to ask more questions. Speaking of questions, during each one of the sessions, if you do have a question specific for what's being talked about, there's a panel on the right-hand side, which I encourage you to put your questions into. And if possible, we'll answer it then, or we'll leave it to the end. So with that, again, I thank you for attending today's virtual session. And I'd like to take this opportunity to pass it to Andrew at this point.
Thank you very much, Michael. I just need you to stop sharing your screen, and then I can share mine. It's telling me.
I just need to get out of it.
There we go.
All yours.
Perfect. Where is... right, are you seeing my screen now, Michael?
Yes, we are.
All right, great. And let's swap these two slides out. So yeah, thanks very much everyone for attending. As Michael mentioned, this is going to be about contract administration. I got asked to present a fairly specific topic related to site visits and walkthroughs. So that's what we're going to do. Just a couple of quick slides. I kind of view this in a couple of ways, right? I always think of the classic mode. There's the way we used to do it. And when I look at this picture, I can hear the music of Mario Brothers. And when I think of the way it used to be done, it was, you know, taking your camera, maybe, right? Grab your camera, walk out on site. Probably have a pen and paper, something. Now maybe you've got a tablet and you were writing something in OneNote, Evernote, whatever you got, Word, but you document it in some way. You go back, you try to match what you wrote down to the pictures you had, and then you got to create a form, which may have to be saved in another format before you email it or file it away in the folder structure that you've got internally, or both. And then you've got to track it. So you probably have to log that you've done it, you know, and then anything that was a follow-up item, you've got to make sure that you've recorded that appropriately to go back and look at. And then you've got to talk about it with everybody else as to how do we follow up on those items? Where are they standing? What's next? So it's a really big workflow, right? There's a lot of steps. It was laborious. What Autodesk has done is they've taken the BIM 360 platform, which many of you may already use today, whether it's just for documents or Revit Cloud work sharing. Coordination is also coming along very strong. We've seen a huge uptick in adoption on it, even before the extended usage that Michael was speaking about that was provided to everybody with free trials. For the past couple of years, there's been a huge shift of people going to the cloud and starting to use the platform. So what they've done is they've said, hey, we really need to be able to provide the information people need on site. So one, we need the information out there. Two, it has to be easy to communicate what we capture at site to others. We also have to be able to look back and report on all the information that we're capturing in a meaningful way to us and our partners. And it's all got to fit in your pocket. We want it fast, we want it easy like Sunday morning, right? So that's the game, that's the goal. And what they've done to try and do that, I'll pop into some product now, is they've extended the BIM 360 application and the workflows available in it. So here I am in the web browser version. I'm already in field management and I'm in checklists. So this is going to be fairly quick because there's a limited amount of time for me to present a fair amount of information. So it might move fairly quickly. Hopefully I get all the points knocked out. Checklists are created by you. They're templates. They're certainly not the only way to generate non-conforming issues that you might have on a project, but it is a way that standardizes the process when you do need to go through and do walkthroughs and site visits. So you're not limited to say, oh, you can only create it if you're doing a walkthrough with a checklist. I can certainly create an issue on its own as a site observation as I'm walking through and continue on and then continue on with my inspection. So in the grid below, what you're seeing is a bunch of different types of inspections that have been done. You can see who they've been assigned to, people who have signed off on it, or if there's pending signatures out there, scheduled dates, any issues that were raised as a result of, and if they've been resolved, so 0 of 1 left, right? This has been closed out, that issue. Can click on it, it takes me over to it. And I can see the overall progress if they're still being worked on. So just some real quick and easy information to be able to flip around and find the other bits and pieces that relate to the checklist. And I could also open them from here to see all the responses. But we'll take a look at that in a little bit of a different way. I did mention that you can also have issues and create them on the fly. So again, here's the, I just call it a bucket. An issue could be anything. It could be a task, an observation. It could be, you know, you name it. So you create a type, or sorry, you've got types. You can modify the types that it comes loaded with them, and then you have subtypes. So there's lots of ways to search, sort, and filter and define your information. You can see here there's some easy ways to do that. And you can also create templates as well. So I don't have to be working from a checklist to be able to have a template for my issues. So if I know I'm going on site and I'm going to be looking around at steel or the metals, I could create a standard issue. And then every time I see one, I can just pin it to a drawing. It just makes it really quick and repetitive, easy. You don't have to key a lot of data in when you're at site. So I wanted to share this. These can be completed from the web browser, but we're going to take a look at it on a phone as well. Before I go off to the phone and look at it from the standpoint of being on site, I'll just open up the waffle menu here to show off that, you know, if you have the other parts of the program activated, right, you could be using this right through from design collaboration, Revit Cloud work sharing, right into coordination, and then having all your documents here. So this is the key, the documents. For the people that are going out and doing things on site, it's like having Revit for the non-Revit user, which is great for a guy like me because I'm not a Revit guy. But here I've got two main folders, plans and project files. So plans are all of the published drawings and models that can be accessed based on security rights, and then additional information. So again, if I'm out on site and I need to know, you know, the doors and windows specs, if I want to pull up some information about product or anything that's going to help me as I do a walkthrough, it's going to be available to me. So everything's there. Now, recognizing that we have a lot of Revit users and people that model, they're probably saying, well, what's in it for me? I've talked to a few people about this. I was talking to an MEP contractor in Alberta the other day, and they said, boy, you know, we've got somebody modeling out in the field in a trailer, and the guys keep coming in, interrupting what he's doing. And they're just asking for some basic information, being able to measure. Is there a way to do that? Can we get them to do it themselves so they don't have to come in and interrupt him? And the answer is yes. As you can see, I've just done a quick measure on a model. I don't have to know anything about Revit, and I can come in here and do those things. I can do first-person walkthroughs. I can get areas, angles, a whole bunch of different things. So what it does is it avoids people coming in and interrupting people that are doing complicated tasks, right, when they're modeling. I also have another person that's a BIM manager in Waterloo, said the same thing. He said, if you can stop people from asking me a question, you win. That's what we want. We don't want to be interrupted. So all the data that you're putting into that Revit model is going to be presented to the people in the field or that are accessing this regardless of their knowledge of Revit. So you can see here, anything that was put in is available to me here. So that's just an additional benefit for some of the people that might be out there going, well, I don't do site visits, I don't really care. So I'll just add a little value for those folks. Let's take a look at, and I'm gonna have to see if I can pull this up on the right screen. So let's take a look at the phone. And of course it's timed out while I've been talking. All right, so now what we've got is we have the same information in my hand, and I'm...
Hi, Andrew. Are we supposed to be looking at your phone?
Oh, it's not coming up?
No.
1 second, Michael. This is the little problem, the hiccup we had last time.
Yeah, multiple monitors, multiple devices.
Too much going on. Does that look better?
Perfect.
Thanks very much. So I'll have to remember to flip back at the end to show you guys the code for the prizes. Don't let me forget. All right, so now we're out in the field and I've got that same information here, which is great. So as I mentioned, I could go in and I could just create an issue right here, work it off of a template, or just create it manually if I am walking the site and I notice something going on that I want to document. But we were talking about checklists and the consistency of it, right? Being able to come in here. I've created 2 already and I've sent them to the device, but you can also create them for yourself while you're on site. So these are a list of pre-existing ones that I could say, yes, you know, while I'm here, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm also going to look at the tile, and I'm going to just give it to myself, the location. I'm actually at building 2 for that. I'm going to go over to the 2nd floor and do the tile while I'm here. So I'm going to pop back out of it. So we've created them on the fly where we can add them. I'm going to use the window treatments, and it just shows me the basic information. This is a punch list when it says. Now I've got the ability to just real easy. I mean, you can change the yes, no's to pass, fails, plus, minus, multiple choice. You could let people write free-form text. However, there's not a huge need for that because, one, you don't get the data continuity, right? Like it's something that people can maybe change. You're also asking them to write in the field, which is a pain in the butt, as opposed to me just saying yes, no, pass, fail. Multiple choice is a better option, I find, or just the yes, no's. And there's always a spot here to say, I want to write an additional note. And I could even just say, I don't even want to write, I just want you to take it for me, Google, and put it into notes for me. Great. easy like Sunday morning, right? I could manually create an issue. However, this passed, so I'm not going to do that. I could also add a photo, even if it passed, even if it was good. I might just want to take a quick photo of the corner of a room and just save that along with it for whatever purpose. And I could go ahead and also mark up that there was a spider in that corner or whatever I want to add. When we print these, those pictures are going to come along with the report that we're going to generate from this. I'm just going to go through, say a few more yeses. I'm going to hit a no. And what it did, you can see here, it just created a little issue down there, number 49, and it pre-filled with the data because I've made it that if things fail, it's automatically going to create an issue for me. It's going to assign it based off of this checklist. And I said that this one's going to go to Joe Capano at Gigs Electrical. He's going to be the responsible party for anything that fails here that we're going to auto create an issue for. And I could just give it a root cause. And I could say that it was an installation root cause. So again, getting all that data back and reporting at the end is really going to be the valuable piece of this for many people to be able to improve on what we're doing today and try to get some big gains on our next project. So I've just gone ahead and completed it very quickly. I'm just going to put my signature on it. We could have multiple people assigned to a single one, and each person could have their own section, and they could all have to sign off on their own sections, or we could just have multiple people signing off on one. But that is how quick it can be. I just created issues, I added pictures, I did a checklist. Obviously, my checklist wasn't very big, but I think the idea here is just the ease of use of doing it quickly in the field like that. And then having all of the additional information here. I did talk about documents as well. So all those documents are here that we were looking at on the web browser. And I'm going to pop back. I'm going to stop sharing this one and go back to sharing my main screen. Hope I get the right one here. All right, let's share this back. All right, Michael, are you looking back at my, okay, great.
Yep, we're all good.
You knew where I was going with that.
Yep.
All right. So as we capture all of this information, what we get at the end is we've got good reporting capabilities. So we're capturing all of the issues, but then we're able to sort and put them back in meaningful ways that are going to tell us things like my risk versus my design information. So here I've got a panel that's just specific to my design. And it's telling me all of my different design type of things that are going on, what reviews are underway, what documents are incomplete. There's a little actual model sitting there for me as well with a tag on it for an issue. We've got project design issues. So this is a filtered list of issues now, just related to design. And we can also see open. So there's a lot of good information here. These are widgets, I call them. I think Autodesk calls them tiles. You can customize them by user. So you can pick different ones and present them and present this board in a totally different way. And you can just save it. There's other ones here that you can see. You could just have different boards for different things. And lastly, you can generate reports. So if we are capturing a lot of issues and we're assigning them to the other party to complete, instead of them having to worry about getting inundated with issues being emailed to them as they're being created, we could also just create a weekly report. And that report could contain all the outstanding issues or all the issues if you want. It really depends how you want to build the report. And it gets emailed on a set schedule. So I had a few set up, and let's see if I can share this without redoing it. Let's go. All right, so now you should be seeing an issue detail report.
Yes, we are.
Perfect, thanks, Michael, because otherwise I have no idea if they've ever even seen this. So yeah, here's a report that I just generated. I created this today. It's for a specific trade in my world, and it's got links. So these links will take you down to the specific issues. You can see here it's got some information. Some of them down here, because of where they were pinned, it actually shows you a pin. And all these little blue hyperlinks are going to take you into the model or potentially a document if you attach it to a document, but it links you into it. So you can just click on these. I could click on the issue and it's going to take me to the issue, and then I can start to deal with it. And you can see down here, it's definitely a quality installation problem. Wrong type of coffee was given. There's also a checklist summary. So I can generate reports that will show me all of my checklists by type and, you know, their percent complete or how many issues were being generated, how many are open and closed on those ones. I have another one here that's the inspection itself. So this is one that was a concrete structure formwork report. It was done back in 2019. And we created it, and as a result, there was a photograph attached even though it passed, like I just did in our example, and all the non-conforming items are in red. So all of this documentation is captured, it's all filed, the signatures are there. It lowers your risk as well, which I think is a key element for people to be able to not only have information for themselves, but being able to provide it to others. Heaven forbid there's some kind of litigation or some other requirement where you really need that documentation backup to reduce risk. So that is streamlining a workflow. There was not a lot of writing. I didn't have to match my pictures to my documents and my notes that I scribbled. And if something comes up while I'm walking through site, I can ad hoc just create an issue and make sure that it's documented, captured, and it's immediately assigned to the appropriate party. So I don't have to worry about following up, because it's all captured and reportable. So that, in a very short period of time, I think I've hit it with like a minute left here. Michael, I don't know, I think people had the opportunity to ask questions. I don't know if any have come through.
A few have come through, but I think we'll leave them for the end at this point. So thank you very much, Andrew. That was really great. I like the fact that you're able to show, you know, both the desktop interface and the mobile interface, plus the results of the reports at the end. That was great. Thank you very much.
No problem. No problem at all. So this is the final slide here. And what we wanted to let everyone know, Michael, was, you know, head over, look on the left-hand side, and look for the visualization to the next level. And it's going to be Terry Sin from Norm Lee, as you mentioned earlier, and the session code down there, so you can get your gift card or win a prize.
Hello all, I'm Daniela, Marketing and Communications Manager from SolidCAD. Welcome to our third session with Terry Lynn on visualization to the next level. I'm going to be just kind of here in the background supporting Terry as he goes through the entire presentation for you guys. He will talk a little bit about taking all of those Revit projects and making them look absolutely beautiful. So on to you, Terry, take it over.
Great. Hey everyone, before we begin, let's open a beer. Cheers to everyone. I really wish we could all be together in a bar right now, but we can't. But so I just wanted to do a little presentation on how to get your renderings to a more polished level. I'm not going to pretend that I know how to do things in Revit, V-Ray, or do them directly in there. What I do want to talk about are the concepts about how to make a great image. So this will be kind of more of an art lesson rather than a technical lesson. For the people who are, I've seen on the guest list that there's people who are from the rendering industry. So this might be a bit more basic, but hopefully there might be some little nuggets that you could use to help out with your renderings. So without further ado, I'm going to start my presentation here. Okay, so a little bit about ourselves. We're one of the largest rendering firms in Canada right now. We create visual content for architecture, real estate, all of the above. And a little bit about myself. I'm a managing director at Norm Lee. I'm also the hiring lead, as well as handling some training as well. I also specialize in outreach such as this to the community, as well as education, mostly in post-secondary. I graduated from Waterloo for architecture, both bachelor's and master's. And I did take a course called the State of Art Academy Masterclass in rendering. If you guys are interested in the advanced kind of theory with rendering, specifically with 3ds Max, I highly recommend you go look at their site. They are in Italy, but hopefully things open up again soon. I'm also a V-Ray certified professional and licensed trainer, and that is my dog Pringle. So this is our team. We are a team of 22, and we're located in Toronto. This is views of our old office. We actually just moved over the pandemic, which was pretty scary, but also really nice because there was no traffic. So again, we create visual content for the architectural world. So stills, animations, VR, AR, XR. We are also avid photographers. If you follow our Instagram, you know that Norm, the founder, loves to go up in helicopters and shoot aerials. So we've been in business for quite a while, and hopefully our experiences can help you make better renderings. Just another slide of some of our more recent renderings. We do use 3ds Max and V-Ray, and more recently we use Corona Render. It's an unfortunate name, but it's a great rendering engine that's also from Chaos Group. So in terms of making great visualizations, again, I don't want to tell you how, because that in itself would be a month of just like little tutorials and lessons. I'd rather look at the why we make these images and why we make certain decisions that lead to a great rendering. So in a basic breakdown, what we usually look at almost in this order to create a great image is storytelling, cameras and composition, lighting and materials, and details and realism. So storytelling, or the narrative of an image, are the who, what, when, where, why. So looking at who your demographic is, looking at what the content of your image is, when this takes place, where it takes place, and why you're doing it in general. This is an example of a competition that we did in Singapore, I believe. And everything about this is about being in Singapore. Even the way that the light hits the sky and that haziness that would happen from the humidity is all based around when, where, why, all of this type of stuff. We looked at the fruits and vegetables that would be native to that area. We looked at brands and things that would be there. And of course, the demographic is of that area. So it's important to not only just make an image that looks great, it's also about the context that you put that image into. On almost the opposite side, this is an image we did in the UK, where the atmosphere is a little bit more moody. The event is, it's a public space. It's meant to show off this kind of almost piazza kind of feel. And even just the kind of slickness of the ground shows that there's a little bit more moisture in the air. It maybe has just rained, which is more akin to the UK. This is an example of a single space. This is actually the Vancouver house by Big. And we are tasked to make a rendering of a leased space, but give it 4 different types of occupancies. It's the same architecture, same lighting essentially, but we populated it with people and accessories in a way that allowed it to be 4 complete different spaces and tell 4 completely different stories. So the idea before you even start to set up cameras and everything is think about what the story is, why you're creating this image, and what the end goal is. And really, once you think of that story, let it guide you throughout the entire image. Composition is basically setting up your camera or your actual objects to make sure that your eye stays on the image. So this first example here, you can actually see that all of the curves and all the lines of the architecture, or the interior design rather, point towards the center and draw your eyes towards there. We're also very naturally linked to seeing other human beings, so our eyes go towards other people. And even the lighting is kind of drawn towards the center where everything else around it is dark, almost like a vignette. If you are interested in a more in-depth look at actually ArchViz kind of composition, this is a great blog by Alex Hogriff. And I'm basically just taking a couple of slides from his blog, but it's pretty much perfect in terms of how to look at how you set up your camera. In photography, the rule of thirds is a pretty common idea of how to frame your image. Basically, you want the subject of your image to be within the crosses of each one of these thirds. There's a lot of history and science behind why that works, but our eyes are naturally just kind of drawn to it. Basically, putting something more in the corner of an image creates a more dynamic composition rather than having it straight in the center. If you are going to do something straight in the center, make sure that it's straight on, almost one point perspective. You'll notice between these two slides that the horizon is usually on either one of those thirds. You want to keep your horizon on either one of those rather than the center most of the time, because then your eye has a harder time kind of discerning which kind of third your eye should look at. So if you want to draw focus upwards, you want your horizon to be lower. If you want your eye to go lower, then put your horizon higher. It also applies to interior shots where you want to keep your focus on these thirds. So this is an example of an image that we've done. And actually kind of unintentionally, I don't think we really looked at the rule of thirds at that time, but it actually lines up perfectly with it. And although it's called a rule, it's not a hard rule. It's not like I need to put something in this empty corner now. It's just about making sure that the things that you want to focus on are on those thirds. This is one of the big things that I've seen in a lot of just straight out of Revit renders, or out of any software for that matter, is correcting your verticals. Our eyes naturally correct verticals for the most part. And it also just adds like a stronger reading of your building. When you're making elevations and everything, you're trying to keep everything vertical, you're keeping everything straight. So you want to adjust it either in Photoshop afterwards, or most software have a kind of auto vertical correct. There are exceptions to the rule. If you want to do a really dramatic, what we call a worm's eye view, or the more common bird's eye view, then you can start to open up from there. But if you are doing something that is supposed to be within the pedestrian level, make sure you correct your verticals. This is another big kind of crime that I see in renders. Don't be a giant. Either stay within eye level and try to capture what it is like to be a pedestrian or a actual tenant in your architecture, or go really high like the previous bird's eye view. If you start to go in between, you'll create kind of a weird tension that feels a bit unnatural. So you want to keep it as a viewer on the page. Another thing to note is that less is more. A lot of the times we're trying to capture everything in one shot. This is an example of a first draft that we based on a client's request to look at the entire terrace of a building. When it came down to it, we felt like it was showing everything, but also nothing at the same time. It's showing everything, but it also doesn't connect you as a person into the view. What we then proposed was actually to split it into two images. I know I said less is more, but it's actually less in each individual view, but showing more overall. Now within these two views, we actually have a first person view, and we actually have a real connection inside of that space, and you feel like you would want to live there. In terms of composition, it's not only just your camera, it's also the content and how you kind of craft the colors. In color theory and just kind of photography in general, warm colors tend to draw our eyes forward, and cool colors, so the blues, tend to push our eyes back. So if you want to draw focus to something, you want to use something that is warm, maybe more saturated, and bring that focus towards the center. Even on something that is as kind of complicated as a hero shot of a building, you can use those warmer colors to draw your eyes towards, let's say, the podium or some of the units up, and then kind of make it cooler as you go upwards to bring the eye back down. So I think on anybody who's done a render, when it eventually comes out, some people might say that it just doesn't look like what it should. The reasons why most of the time are the lighting and the materials. Before all of this, I think the best thing to go about with all of this is just be honest with your content, so that when it comes out, you're just showing what it actually is rather than an ideal. So for lighting, one of the biggest things that we've seen in some renderings are that shadows magically don't exist all of a sudden. It seems like a lot of people are afraid of the dark and don't want to show that shadows exist on their renders. The next few slides are kind of pulled from all over the internet of kind of comparisons between the reality versus the rendering. Shadows are a really big help to your images, actually. While some people might think that, oh, if it feels dark, it feels scary, all of that. But if you're really concentrating on the architecture of your building and the design and form, shadows are what gives your buildings form. Even on an interior, those shadows, those little areas, make the form of your design even stronger. So in conclusion there, don't be afraid of shadows. Use them to your advantage to draw focus and to highlight your building. In general, you want to keep one face of your building, if you're doing exterior, in shadow. It allows the building to have those true 3 dimensions. If you try to put a light directly on the corner of your building will end up feeling really flat. And especially with something with a lot of articulation or a curve, you want those shadows to play to give you a lot of contrast. In terms of setting up your lighting and cameras and things like that, try to look at everything like you would as an architectural photographer. I know within V-Ray for Revit, there are the EV exposure levels. Use them to your advantage. Don't change the intensity of your lights too much. Keep your sun at the same intensity, but change the exposure of your camera like you would in real life. Even your phone camera will adjust its own exposure to match the brightness of its surroundings. And similarly, before I was talking about using warmth, look at the warmth and color of your lights as well. They don't all need to be all white. Throw in some warm and cool in order to draw focus into the areas that you want to. Your sky is also a huge part of lighting. These are actually Revit V-Ray examples that are on their website, and you can see that as the sky changes, your building light needs to change. I did a quick little exercise here where I used the same base rendering, so I did not re-render this building, but I did change the sky. But what I needed to do to the building itself was change the temperature of the blues, turn down some of the contrast, brighten some of them. So a lot of the times when you render out something directly from V-Ray or Corona or Lumion or whatever, the sky might not look the way you want to. So you'll bring it into Photoshop to amp it up with like a photograph of the sky. Still remember that you need to adjust your render or adjust the sky to match your render. For materials, again, going back to the honesty of the materials, really look at how your materials react. I think most companies have quite a big material library of samples in the back where interns are usually hid, like I was. So take a look at those materials, put them out by a window, then put them in front of halogen lights. Look at how they react to the light, and then try to mimic that in your images. It's always hard to kind of separate what you see in your head versus what is real. So even when you're making your concept, try to be realistic about what your materials do, and your render will naturally kind of follow suit if you're able to make those materials. Another big thing is that the world is messy and imperfect. Things are dirty, things are a little bit sloppy, and again, you shouldn't be afraid of those things like shadows. Try to integrate them into your render to add a little bit more realism and a bit more life to them. This is actually an example of one of our renders versus the final building. And you can see that our concrete and everything was very clean, very smooth, when in reality, there's, you know, form marks, there's, you know, watermarks and all those type of things. And it just makes things feel a lot more realistic. And I don't think you should be afraid of those things. Another big thing is that there's no such thing as pure colors. So if you have a white material, that white material will look like something else. The red will look like something else, depending on the environment that it's in. Reflections are also a lot stronger than you think. This is an example of an art piece someone created. Mirrored surfaces are much stronger than you think. And I recommend just kind of walking around looking at buildings and see how mirrored things look. Again, a couple more examples of how reflective, especially glass, is. Even at night, your glass still has some sort of reflectivity bouncing off and capturing your environment. Another big thing is that you usually can't see clearly inside of a building during the day. I know a lot of people want to show everything at once, going back to the less is more kind of train of thought, where if you're doing an exterior shot, maybe concentrate on the idea of that exterior and then let that glass be reflective rather than trying to force almost an interior image onto an exterior image. Especially during the daytime, you might catch things that are close to the windows or lights that are on maybe that are really close to the windows, but you're not going to see through a building completely. So combining light and materials is another factor as well. Again, whenever your material is in a different environment, it will change that material. And also, again, don't be afraid that your white material isn't looking white anymore. I would say embrace that kind of reaction and go with it and let that building kind of have a different life given the different times of day. These are some great photographs from Double Space Photography, a local Toronto photography team. So you can see here, even something that is a black metal, within each time of day, it causes a different reaction to each situation and is beautiful in its own sense. Things like wood, we all have kind of a concept in our mind of what wood should look like, but as lighting changes, we need to change how that perception is. Again, some more reflective materials. You can see how this building looks completely different in 3 different times of day. And again, this is an example of being able to see through. During nighttime, you're able to look into the building, but on those other times of day, you can't. Another example of a render versus reality, you can see how much the light and the surroundings actually affect the metal, opposed to what the concept created by the architect was. So in conclusion there, light changes the way your materials read, and don't be afraid of it and let it actually add to the art of your image and your design. This is, details and realism is a little bit tricky to talk about because of course everybody's at a different level of rendering skill, or maybe just from a beginner all the way to an expert. But the way to make things look good is to keep on adding detail and to keep on making things seem realistic. So here we actually got this as a Revit model, and what we did in turn working with the architects was add detail to it. And of course this is very advanced, but the idea of it is that your renders will become more convincing if you start to add those little details. You know, the gaps of glass joints, spider joints on your glass, slab edge details and things like that. Luckily with Revit, if you are making an advanced model, you're naturally making those things. So it's about making sure that those things are, that have materials and are being shown off. Another big thing that you can do is use photography to your advantage. In this image, the white building, of course, is a render, but the rest of it is a photograph. Especially walking around Toronto nowadays, the streets are empty. You can place your buildings into real world situations, and then it's less about trying to make everything else realistic and just concentrating on your building itself. Another big thing is entourage, so that's what we call the people that are in images. If you look at this image very quickly, the people in it seem fine, and you could kind of pass this off in a presentation. However, if you start to look closer, there's a lot of crimes that are happening right now. There's a person this couple is wearing winter coats. The shadow here is just a blob. If you look here, the light is on the back of this woman, whereas all of the shadows are coming from the left over here. These women are actually in cocktail dresses drinking champagne at the moment. So there's all of these things that if you start to look closer at the image, will start to bring you out. What I find is that no matter how great and realistic your image is, if you mess up the people in Photoshop on it, it can ruin the entire image. So this is our stab at it proper. So you'll notice that all of the light is coming in the right direction. All of the people are within the correct story. Since there's a lot of retail here, we have a lot of people with shopping bags. So it's important to look back on your story and then look at the details that will make that story more real. So with all of these concepts in mind, how do you actually get from, making basic renders to getting something a bit more realistic and a bit more artistic as well? The biggest thing for us is finding references. It might seem like cheating, but what you want to do is look at the real world and see what buildings actually look like and how light reacts to them. For the next couple of images, the image on the left are photographs that we used as reference, and the image on the right is our render. So if we compare the two, we actually there are slight differences, of course, but we looked at how the light was reacting, how the glass was looking, even the shadows in the foreground. We looked at how those would work. So a lot of the times, if you're looking for the answer of why isn't my render looking real, look at the real world and use it in comparison. A lot of the times, the final push that you need is the Photoshop stage at the end, where you just need to match some colors, darken some areas, sharpen some areas. Another example here of dusk, which is definitely one of the harder things to do. And I'll show you a slide later of how kind of an in-between stage between these two images. Interiors as well. This is actually an image that I did where I didn't really have a concept of what a penthouse suite that I definitely can't afford would look like in this kind of magical, purple sunset. So I found an image that was very similar to it, and honestly, I copied it. And that's the best way to learn and get better. And then as you start to do this more and more, you'll build that library in your brain of how light reacts and how colors look and how contrast looks like in certain situations. Day shots inside are also very hard, even though they might seem like the easiest because you just have the sun. But a lot of the times the shadows might come out too dark or your outside might be too bright. So again, look at photographs, look at good photographs to be clear, and look at how light reacts there. You also want to look at photographs to understand what seasons look like, what different situations look like. If you want to do a scene in the rain, how does a street light look like when it's reflecting off the ground? For us, when we're looking at seasons, we even need to look at how skies look like during different seasons, because a sky might be more blue, more purple, more green, depending on the season. For us, we've basically been collecting references for the last couple of years, going on ArchDaily, Dezeen, all these different sites, using Pinterest as kind of our board. It's not just for crafts and wedding planning. You can use it to gather different types of images and build up a library for yourself of good images. What you want to do is look for images all of the time, rather than trying to find the image when you need it, because there's so many images out there. So as you're kind of looking at architectural news and seeing the new buildings that are being built and things like that, or taking photos yourself, put them into your library so that when that shot comes that you want to mimic, you have that resource already. Again, try to look at architectural photography. Basically, at beginning stages, try to copy photography and look at what makes their images so great. So a couple of our favorites are, of course, Double Space that we showed before, Houghton Crow and Iwan Ban. So build up that library. There can be different styles. You know, there's some that are more high contrast, others that are a bit more ephemeral. Find your style and start building that library of images that you can use. So looking at that previous image that I showed, the middle image here is what came out of the render, out of V-Ray at the time. So what I needed to do on a short timeline was to find and work with my reference and build it up to a point in Photoshop to bring it to that level. So using just camera raw filters, adjustment layers, and a little bit of painting and replacing, actually I don't think I replaced the sky, I just kind of adjusted the tone of it. I brought it to a level that was there. So don't be discouraged by the render that comes out of V-Ray, but do try to apply corrections to it in Photoshop to try to bring it together to look more like your reference. So I guess in conclusion, take a look around at the world and look at why things are looking realistic in the first place. Look at photography, look at the buildings around you, and use those as a reference to build up your own library in your head of what things should look like. And don't be afraid of what reality throws at you. So if you want to look at more of our work, you can go to our website at normlee.global and follow us on Instagram at normandthegang. On our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniela, again, Marketing and Communications Manager at SolidCAD. Welcome to our last session where you will be able to ask any of those questions that you've been meaning to ask to our speakers. I have Michael Rotolo, our National Director from the AEC Division. I have Andrew Cole, our presenter and subject manager for the Construction Management Solutions, and obviously Terry Seen, who is the Managing Director at Normlee, who just did our presentation on visualization for Revit projects. I did see some comments about Chuck Norris. Not going to mention those or have any questions about that.
Those were hilarious, by the way.
I know. I was like, I don't want to hide these. I'm going to leave them there for people to see. But moving forward, please feel free to use the right-hand side with any questions that you do have. But I know that actually Michael Rotolo is going to start off with the first question for Terry.
Yeah, Terry, so you showed some amazing renderings there and images. What's your one or two favorite go-to technologies that you use when you do that?
Well, I have been seeing some comments here about the Corona render, which is an unfortunately named rendering software at the time. Maybe it's making sales better, but it is by Chaos Group, who are partnered up with SolidCAD as well. And one of the things that's really amazing about their render, opposed to V-Ray, let's say, is they have something called Light Mix, which basically when you're done the render, you can still adjust the lights on the still image, basically. So it's almost like having a raw photo, but you're able to turn on and off lights without having to re-render. That's been an amazing kind of leap there. I think the new version of V-Ray, V-Ray 5, has added that to it, but we haven't tested it out yet. But it's definitely helped us be a little bit more have a bit more freedom with our renders. Although I spoke a lot during my presentation about, you know, fix it in Photoshop after, which is absolutely what you should do as a beginner or as you're starting to learn, just to kind of get it to the stage that you want to. You definitely want to try to get the image as close as possible in the software first, and then try to do that extra push at the end. So that's been really interesting and really helps us kind of feel more like photographers rather than renderers, which has been really nice. Of course, all the other technology that happens just keeps on kind of like, some of it, you know, just swishes by. It looks really cool, but it doesn't catch on and all that type of stuff. You know, everybody has been talking about Unreal for forever. And I think, you know, we're seeing a little bit more and more use of it in kind of commercial uses. Beforehand, it was definitely kind of a niche thing that most firms would just kind of do small projects with them and, you know, do R&D with it. But now we're seeing a lot more interest in it, and especially nowadays when, you know, we're doing a pub night in our laptops right now. So the idea of using game engines and virtual things has always been a part of developing technologies and rendering. But now I think we might see a little bit more of it because of our current situation. I think people have kind of, you know, looked into it a little bit more now. And aside from that, it's just always a, like, you never know what's going to come next. Like whenever I have like a slide or something in a presentation about like what the future technology is, it's just a question mark. It's just a slide with a question mark on it. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Well, actually, I have one more question, which I didn't prepare you for. So hopefully it's on the mark. Out of all the projects that you guys manage or work on, do you leverage cloud computing? And if so, how much percentage of your jobs is cloud computing based versus using your super internal servers?
Well, we have definitely used cloud servers from time to time, most of the time just to test out, or if we're really in a crunch. But when it just comes down to it for us, we do so much custom stuff and we're kind of doing things on the fly and stuff like that, that if things aren't one-to-one between the cloud server and our weird custom smashed together Mad Max stuff that we're doing, it can lead to some problems. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of that out there, and I would recommend people to look into it, especially as people who are maybe at companies or freelancers and things like that. Again, V-Ray has a V-Ray cloud, which has been really helpful to a lot of people. And it's basically, it allows you to see your render going on these crazy supercomputers on a web browser. And we've tested it out, and it's really cool. It's just, for us, just our workflow really relies on us being able to have kind of one-to-one feedback from what we're doing. But it's definitely something that will continue to grow for sure. And as our internet connections keep on getting faster and faster, I'm never going to say never in terms of cloud computing, because everything that we do is on there.
Thanks for sharing. Daniela, has there been any other questions?
Yes, this one's actually directed for Terry as well. What software was used for the renderings in addition to Revit?
So what we do usually, and because most architects nowadays are doing everything in Revit, we get the model in Revit, and we either directly import it into 3ds Max, which they're actually all owned by the same company of Autodesk. So there's a way to directly open it in there, but there are some hiccups that happen in between sometimes. So sometimes we export as an FBX and bring it into 3ds Max. And then within 3ds Max, we add on all those details that you see. So all the trees, you know, the cars, all those little details are actually 3D models. Those aren't things that we put in Photoshop. So that tree is made up of a bunch of polygons. All of their leaves and everything are in 3D. And then we use either V-Ray or nowadays mostly Corona to do the lighting and materials. There is quite a bit of that hiccup that I was talking about between 3ds Max and Revit. It's because Revit is so great at being detailed and having everything in there. When we bring it into 3ds Max, we can barely rotate it because there's so much stuff going on in it. So we do need to do some cleaning and figuring out layers and things like that, but that's all just part of the puzzle in terms of making an image. And then of course at the end we do Photoshop and things like that.
Great. We did get another question, again, for you, Terry. You seem to be the hot topic this time.
I don't
So
mind.
the question is, you mentioned some things come and go. VR seems to be one of those interesting technologies that hasn't caught on. Is it the equipment or is it something else?
Oddly enough, I think it's coming back again because again of this virtual world that's happening. So maybe some people want to see their model suite digitally instead. Yeah, VR's always been a weird thing because I find that when it started to happen and people were interested in it, it happened hard and fast. It was like almost all of our projects had a VR aspect to it for almost a year or two. And then all of a sudden it was back to animations and video and things like that. And one of the interesting things I would say about that is probably because of Instagram, because all of a sudden it became about how can I make a 30-second Instagram story or an Instagram video rather than having to set up this VR and all this type of stuff. But again, now we're seeing it come back. I would say, though, there's definitely, again, another thing where if you do VR right now in a sales center, which wouldn't really happen, you have to put on a VR headset that who knows has touched it. And you have to, you know, there's a physical aspect about it. There's also the other side of it that some people get motion sick, and that's not their fault. And they love using it, and then they just feel like throwing up after they take it off. So there's a lot of factors that are in play. Another part of it, I would say, is that there is an age gap in terms of all technology. And so we might see people that are younger or of my generation that later on when they become decision makers may get back into VR as well. So it really has to do, I think the technology is definitely there, maybe making it a bit more wireless, making sure the headsets, you don't need like no neck to like make sure it stays on your head. So there's all these kind of like little things that could probably happen with all of that type of stuff. But I think in the end, it's really just about what users want.
Thank you. There were some questions actually that got voted up to the top. So one of them, again, for you, Terry, is have you seen people using more BIM 360?
It's hard to tell on our end because we basically just get the model in the end, and we're not necessarily in the architecture firm seeing what people are using. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people are using it in terms of kind of prototyping and things like that.
Thank you.
I might not be the right person to ask that because I'm not. We don't use it particularly in our firm, so we're not seeing it one-to-one right now.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But maybe the rest of the guys can see if they've seen anything.
For sure. Maybe we'll just ask Michael Rotolo there. But there was a few other questions again. Do you remake Revit files or link them in, I guess, when it comes to your visualization projects?
It depends on what happens, really. If it's a really complicated building, we will try to import it using the FBX method instead of like bringing everything one-to-one. But sometimes, yeah, there are situations where especially if it's just a smaller section and we know that we can add a bit more detail and a bit more realism to it, we might remodel just certain parts of the model. But again, like Revit, if you're using all of the kit of parts that already comes with Revit, there's more detail than we actually need sometimes.
Great. One for Andrew. Yay, it's getting voted up to the top. There was a comment that bald is in style right now, just so you guys know.
I love that comment.
I don't like that comment. I'm not going bald anytime soon. But for Andrew, like the suggestion that someone isn't going to stop me from doing my work because I'm the Revit guy, how easy is it for folks to adapt and to learn the tools you shared? YouTube vids, or do they need training? Is it all tech on the mobile?
So yeah, there's a lot of questions in there.
There is. So we'll start with the first one.
So I'll start with the very basic. Is it hard to learn? And the answer is no. And I'll put it in this sense. Well, I have a construction technology background. I have no design background. I learned how to use those tools on my own, more or less. A little direction here and there, but overall, for the most part, that was self-taught. However, if you're going to get into setting up complicated workflows and wanting to connect things and make it work across an organization, then certainly investing in training is valuable. Not so much that you couldn't figure it out, but it's the time to value. So yeah, give me a month, I can figure it out, but give me a trainer for a day and I can figure out the same amount of information and start to use the tool quicker, and therefore getting my return on investment faster as well, saving us time and getting us back to work. Did that answer most of the questions that was in that question?
I think you got it.
I think so.
All right.
I think so. So we can go on to, oh, I think it just got hidden. Hold on. Sorry, there was one again for you, Andrew, with the contract administration platform. Is there ability to populate this software? Hold on, people keep voting it, so it moves it on my end. Is there ability to populate the software from other digital platforms such as eBase, RForm, etc.?
It would depend where and what data. So there are ways to import data into that application. Some of them through Excel files, right? That would be the only way. Or if you had somebody do some development for you, right? So it's all built on a platform called Forge, which is a developer's toolbox, if you will, that gives us the ability to connect it to other things. So it would depend on exactly what you want to connect and what their ability to extract the information is and how it can be delivered out.
Great, thank you for that. There was one for Terry, specifically about, it got voted to the top as well. Have you ever had to work on a model from ArchiCAD?
Yes. That is all. Yeah, actually, no, I actually, there was a firm that we were working with where their entire, their software package was using ArchiCAD instead of Revit. So there was a disconnect, but I ended up, we went back and forth with one part of a file over and over again, tried this type of export, tried to bring it in, nope. And then and we had to go back and forth. So I did eventually find a proper setting for it. If people want to know about it, they can message me directly. I'm not going to explain it right now. But yeah, once it's in 3ds Max, it is very similar to everything else. It's really, I find with a lot of different softwares, it's really just knowing that one secret of like, what type of file format do I need to change it to bring it into this one? And it really applies to any kind of software that you use. Knowing what that is. Honestly, I know a lot of people kind of scoff at it, but one of the easiest things to bring into 3ds Max is actually SketchUp, because it is so simple. You're just kind of bringing it into it. But yes, we have done stuff in ArchiCAD, and it definitely requires the whoever's making the original file to be well organized with it. I find with Revit, because of the kind of language connectivity between the two softwares, you can easily get away with bringing it in pretty quickly, but with ArchiCAD, you do have to be quite specific on one end, knowing that you're going to bring it into another.
Thank you. There is another question for you, Terry. Could you please talk a little bit more about the cleaning process from Revit to 3ds Max?
It's just deleting a lot of stuff, basically. Again, Revit is amazing. It's you know, it allows you to basically make all of your drawings at once. But that also means that when we're doing a hero image, like one of those tall tower images, that means the toilets, the fire sprinklers, the desks, everything is still inside of there. So one way would be, and it really just depends on who's asking the question. Like if it's within, actually, it might be the same thing. It would be up to the person first that makes the Revit file to kind of turn off a lot of these things that you aren't going to see. So again, I'm saying toilets because I'm deleting toilets all the time, whole layers of toilets in an entire building. So getting rid of, you know, all the things that you don't need, and vice versa. If it's for an interior, you know, get rid of the things around there and then bring it in. If you are just getting this model and that's all you have and you're bringing them to 3ds Max, hopefully they're on layers and things like that. If you're familiar with 3ds Max, there is a selection tool that is select similar or select instance. So hopefully that one toilet is instanced and then you just select one and then you get rid of it. So really a lot of stuff also, even though I did mention about how realistic things should be when you're working on an image, it's realistic also in the sense that you're doing a movie set where you don't necessarily need every aspect of everything to be in your image. You just need to have things that are in view or reflected behind you and all that type of stuff to be in there. So again, going back to the storytelling and planning and knowing your camera, once you know your camera or generally where you need to be, just delete everything that doesn't need to be there. So that would basically be the kind of cleaning process. There are also a lot of great plugins for 3ds Max. Cine Forensic will go through and try to find any weird little hidden things that happen through the exporting and importing process. And yeah, like I'm sure there's forums dedicated to how do I clean up this model and why is my computer on fire? So.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think we are still good for time. We'll take a few more questions. I see that there are two at the top that are kind of have 3 votes each. So one of them is, do you see a lot of Format being used? To Terry.
Sorry, which software?
Do you see a lot of Format being used?
I don't know what that is.
It's Autodesk Format. It's the equivalent of SketchUp.
Oh, I have actually not heard of that, and that's pretty interesting. Right now, I don't think we've seen any of that. But I feel just like SketchUp, anything that allows people to quickly model things will always be good for people. And sometimes I actually would rather have something that is quite simple, that is brought to us so that we can add our own detail, because then it allows us as artists to kind of design for once a little bit. But yeah, that's news to me, and I'm definitely going to look into it. But yeah, so far it's still been, I can tell you that the main files that we do get are Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, and then sometimes ArchiCAD. And then otherwise it's straight up old school AutoCAD, and we have to pull up the elevations and everything and build it from scratch.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We can probably take a couple more. This is again for you, Terry. How is the material assignment in 3ds Max for a model brought from Revit? Do you use materials from the Revit model, or do you remap objects to get those 3ds Max materials?
Again, going back to the idea of a movie set, the things that are further away, if we're able to get away with just using the textures that are already built in, then we'll try to leave them as is because we can get away with it. Usually so both V-Ray and Corona have a converter. So basically once you bring it into 3ds Max, you click on this converter and it'll convert all the materials into V-Ray or Corona. So it's not like it's going to cause any errors or things like that, but it's an important step when you're rendering. However, as you get closer and closer to the camera, depending on how good that material is, you're going to want to add more detail. A lot of the times, the textures that come from Revit are quite small, so they repeat over and over again, and that's like, your brain is really good at finding patterns. So once you see the same piece of wood over and over again, it takes away from the realism of the image. So finding larger textures and all that type of stuff. And then of course, the biggest thing, which is kind of like the main reason why there's a huge difference between just taking something directly from Revit without V-Ray or whatever, is reflections and glossiness and specular and all those type of things that we see whenever we look at a surface, that sheen and that brightness to things. So yes, definitely some cases where we just leave things as be, we just use the converter and let it go. But definitely as we get closer and closer to the camera, or if there's something that the architect themselves wants, like is limited by Revit in terms of how that material looked, we enhance it on our side.
Thank you. So we're going to be taking one last question, which is actually for Michael. So as the National AEC Director, what trends are you seeing across Canada in the digital technology side?
I am seeing a huge move to a collaborative way of working. Being a bit biased, it is mostly around the BIM 360 platform. The other thing we are seeing is that, especially in this COVID time, a lot of firms are seeing a success in their staff working from home, getting the work done, either be it through a collaborative platform like that, or they may have already had something set up, like some sort of VPN or remote desktop set up, and they're able to collaborate that way. But the other big trend that we're starting to see is modular. And that is why, again, I'll talk about KitConnect. We're investing in that direction, and prefab modular prefab is that big area that we're seeing a huge increase in. And I know some of the large firms out there, like Z Modular, I think Ellis Dawn, and even PCL have those modular divisions as well that are starting to grow.
Thank you for that. So I think that concludes our Q&A panelist discussion. For any questions that weren't answered today, we're going to obviously follow up with you. A lot of those questions are for you, Terry, so I'll share these with you afterwards, and we can kind of figure out a...
quickly just say that if you do want to ask me directly, my LinkedIn is on my profile for the event. So if you want to just message me directly, I'm probably going to regret that, but but I'll be happy to answer some more technical questions.
Well, Terry, I learned something big, that your visualization is much more interesting and entertaining than contract admin. That's what my takeaway from here. Nothing, Andrew, you did a great job, but
I had a feeling coming into this that was the case.
Okay, great.
We just have more pretty pictures. That's all it is. It's just it's all a facade.
I'd like to also thank all of our partner products who are in the virtual booth, Durofus, Knowledge Smart, Matterport, and all the rest of them as well. And also just a reminder to complete the event survey on the left-hand side. Give us your opinion. Maybe even suggest a topic for the next session that we're going to have. Hopefully we'll be out of COVID by that time, or at least being able to get together at that time. But if not, we'll probably do it in this format again next quarter.
All right.
So with that, Danielle, is there anything else that I missed?
No, I think you got everything. Just an FYI, this platform is live until the end of the day. So if you guys want to continue to talk to all of our employees, that's totally fine. Chat with one another, visit the booths if you didn't have a chance to. All of that is available still.
Great. Well, with that, Terry, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. You did really well. Same goes to you, Andrew. And Daniela, as always, you did a great job with your team, Riki and Fatim as well. Thank you.
First time doing this, virtual events.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.